This is Andi Purewal for Boxing News. I'm joined by Kalle Sauerland over Zoom. Kalle, always a pleasure. It's been a minute since we last spoke. You're up north. How is life treating you?
I'm the northeast, my friend. Let's make the differentiation there. No, it's fantastic. Sunny day in Sunderland. Just had the weigh-in. Josh Kelly tomorrow night, live on DAZN. Colombian banger on the other side of the ring. So got to keep eyes open. I know it's the homecoming and it's almost Christmas and all that, but it's a live fight, dangerous fight in terms of, that Colombians can come over and do the business we've seen historically in the UK. So keep our eyes open for that because a big year ahead for Josh. #1 in the world now. Lovely for him to return to Sunderland after, I think, 13 years away as an amateur last time, returning as #1 in the world, WBO #1 ranked, IBF #4. So, yeah, it's just felt like the right place to do it before the big fights in obviously some interesting locations next year, probably.
We'll come on to that world scene shortly, Kalle, but just sticking with Josh at 154. What's impressed you the most since he's made that move up now? He's had a few fights to adjust to the weight. Looks very refreshed at 154.
He does. It certainly gives him a bit of breathing space, you feel, on the scales, that's for sure. As happens with age, I can testify to that. But it's more that, he's definitely added the punching power. Been a lot of talk about that this week. Adam's very, very impressed with what he's been doing in the gym. But for Josh, it's like it just seems in a good place. He's coming off that win last year, at the end of last year, which sort of closed the chapter of the whole, his loss early in his career, coming back from that, and that Troy Williamson fight. I think going into that with so many proper experts saying Troy was going to win, and it was a big night. And this year he's done he's obviously been out twice, but it's also he's done a lot of work in the gym, and moved up those rankings nicely this year. As I said, #1 in the world. So that mandatory will be called next year. There's also an IBF vacant belt. He's at #4, so he'll be in the mix for that as well. And then you can't look past those sort of domestic blockbusters around that super welter middleweight part. And some of those fighters might not be around in a couple of years. So you look at it and think, well, those are very interesting names. And, one day, it's all about creating, of course, earning money in professional boxing, but also creating a legacy. And those sort of fights, are part of a career, aren't they? You look back at big fights, and yes, of course, they're often for world titles or European titles or British titles, but it's very much about when you attract the mainstream is having an A side and a B side that the people that can actually recognize. That's always something special.
I mean, you just look at that world scene with Josh. Obviously, you mentioned the WBO position. Tim Tszyu, the current title holder. If that fight was to take place next year, I imagine Tim would be a big favourite. He's continued to impress every time he steps up. What gives you the confidence as Josh's promoter that he could take on Tim Tszyu and deal with his best attributes?
Yeah, well, I mean, with all respect to Tim Tszyu, I think he's been rushed quite a lot. I think he's been pushed very fast. I think that if you look at Josh's pedigree as an amateur, you ask anyone who's involved in the amateur scene, he was by far the most talented in the amateurs at that time. There's lots of people who testify to that. But it's talent don't pay the bills, especially in boxing. It's hard graft, and Josh has he's moved at a very, very sensible pace. And I just you feel that he's in a position with, I think he's got more pedigree than a Tszyu. Go back, from throughout his career. So yes, of course, he's a challenger. Tszyu's been in big fights as a champion, no doubt about that. But it's a fantastic fight. If that comes about next year, Josh will be raring to go.
One of those big domestic names that could happen now, obviously, with a fallout around Conor and Junior, is a potential Conor Benn fight. Obviously, a few years back, Conor and Josh were touted to potentially line up against each other. Have they maybe a few discussions in the background at all about?
I remember it would be in I remember that fight being bandied about. I can't remember what show it was. We were doing a show at the O2, and I remember I think they were both there, and it was a Sky show at the time. I think it might have been Josh Taylor Regis Progress that we did the WBSS final. I think, but I'm not going to put my house on it, but it was. I'm pretty sure it was around that fight. That fight goes back a long way, yeah. And then they changed weights, and when I was, and then Josh obviously had that loss. He's come back from that now, totally closed that chapter off, and he's #1 in the world. So, if you're Conor Benn and you're looking to get to titles, yeah, of course, that's an interesting fight, but at the same time, there's other names around that space as well, and I've said before, you do a whole tournament around that area. I love a tournament, but that's that there's so many interesting fights around there. I'm sure you want to talk about the fallout of Junior and Benn in a minute, but ultimately, if you look at it, Junior, Benn, Brook, Kelly, and there's other names as well. Florian Marku, who's also domestically. I know he's not a Brit, but he's does a lot of tickets in the UK. He's got quite a good profile in the UK. Got a lot of interesting names around that way.
What do you think it would take to maybe tempt Kell Brook out of this retirement, Kalle? Because I've seen him recently. I've seen it come out recently that he'd only come back for a big fight. So, what do you feel like you'd have to do to tempt him into a bout with Josh Kelly?
Yeah, I mean, I saw Kell. Back in September at the Eubank Smith fight. Actually, I was sitting next to him, and he was in fantastic nick. Yeah, and rumor has it, I have my 1 or 2 spies up at the old Ingle gym. He's in training. Yeah, he's been in training. I know he's been in that gym. He's not gonna be going down there for a gentle workout, is he? No. Kell's not finished yet. He's just been for a fantastic performance against Amir Khan. Fantastic. Probably performance of his career. So no, not buying it. And there are and there are big fights out there. But if there was no big fights out there, I'd probably go, yeah, all right. He's made enough money, he can live comfortably, and probably a couple of generations of Brooks beyond that. But it's not. I don't think that the fire's quite gone out there. I think he's eyeing the big fights, and why not? He's a young man still. He's fit. Fit, willing, and able. They say, yeah.
Kalle, you mentioned earlier, you knew that I'd come on to it. Obviously, a big talking point in the past 24 to 48 hours is the fallout around the Eubank Jr-Conor Benn fight. Just from your position as Junior's promoter, why are we not seeing that fight next?
Just boils down to commercial reasons, not really much more to say. I didn't say more yesterday, can't really say more today than that. Sometimes these things don't happen in boxing. We've seen it quite often. Sometimes they get made. That's, I guess, the exciting part of boxing and looking onto it. Sometimes the frustrating part as well. But no, just couldn't find a commercial agreement on it, so we move on.
Obviously, we've seen Eddie's comments that it was a big pot of gold, shall we say, put towards Junior to get that fight over the line. I don't expect you to give me the finer details, but how far off would you say their offer was from what Junior would have found acceptable?
You'd have to ask Junior. I don't know. I'm not the one who's got to get in the ring. We can only try and make things happen if within the realms of it. It's obviously a massive fight in the UK. Massive fight in the UK, but it's also not a massive fight outside the UK at the same time. It's a good fight outside the UK, and I'm sure there's lots of expats in Los Angeles and Australia and South Africa who would probably tune in as well. But it's not like it's not for a world championship. It's a proper British fight, and don't get me wrong, it's a generational British fight. It's absolutely massive, but at the same time, it is a British fight. So the pot of gold, so to speak, is British. It's pay-per-view, and it's tickets, yeah, which is pretty much it. So that's what the pot is. You know, sponsorship, yeah, a bit here, a bit there, but sponsorship at the moment, you know, given the world economic situation, isn't exactly the best time with sponsors. I can tell you that now. I think most promoters would agree with me. So that, you know, it's quite a simple calculation to do around an event like that, because you don't have a big US revenue stream. You don't have a big I'm just thinking like AJ Klitschko, for example. You had, I don't know, $5 million coming out of Germany. You had a couple of million coming out of Eastern Europe. You had a couple of million coming out of the US. It's different, you know, when it's an international fight. It's not an international fight. It's one of the biggest fights ever that would have taken place in the UK, but it's not a big international fight. Still makes it a very interesting event to do, but unfortunately that's not the case.
Obviously, regardless of people's thoughts on whether they wanted to see it or not, I agree it's a huge fight if it had taken place. Listening to Conor's most recent comments, he's suggested he doesn't think the fight will ever take place now. Do you think it can be brought back to life and it could happen next year?
This would be a very personal comment, because it's like looking into it's like guessing the weather here next year, isn't it? I don't know. The thing is, you've got Junior coming off a win. You've got Conor undefeated. That won't stay the same. I'm not saying that Conor's going to lose or Junior's not going to be coming off a win, but it is, you know, you've got to bet on that the interest will be as high. You know, if they both go off and lose, it certainly won't be. But it could, yeah, it could, but at the same time, it's, yeah, I mean, you know, how long does it take? You know, I don't know. I've got no idea. I don't think Junior wants to box forever either. I've got no idea how long he wants to box for still. He's, you know, obviously coming off a great win against Liam Smith. And, you know, roll from there.
Obviously, in the background, there's been all the talk of Conor's ongoing case with the board. So just away from that, do you feel like as that continues to kind of go on, there's any chance that maybe Saudi Arabia enters a frame or Abu Dhabi? Because Eddie's mentioned Abu Dhabi, and we know about the financial power that those areas of the world are bringing into boxing as well.
Yeah, and by the way, they're doing a great job of staging big events. Again, they'd have their views on it. You know, I'm not one to say, you know, if no one really come in for it now. It's pretty high profile that we were in negotiations. And I think they're looking at the moment, they're looking at the heavyweights, aren't they? So, you know, that's a path they're taking. Can that change in the future? Absolutely. I'm sure it can. You know, but I think for the moment, I'm not gonna sit there and you know, get a begging bowl out or something now. It's not the time. It's, you know, we've got to move on now, and do what's the best thing next.
What is next for him? Next then, Kalle, obviously we saw the IBO's called out the mandatory position for their title. Do you expect that to be the route Junior goes for his next fight?
Yeah, I mean, look, they've called for that this week. I mean, you know, because as a promoter, you're permanently throughout the year lobbying federations to give you mandatory shots, to put you up the rankings. I think we write over 200 letters a year for our team. You know, we've got the WBA convention this week, a lot of lobbying going on there as well. You know, so, you know, that came off this week. Fantastic. But we're in negotiations on that now. You know, it's very fresh, the other stuff. So we'll see where these negotiations go through now on the IBO. That's the mandated fight.
Just one thing to move away from it, and you mentioned kind of Saudi's interest in the heavyweight. Somebody you've worked with in Filip Hrgovic returns next week. I just wanted to get more of an understanding on that relationship now. Obviously, it came out that he parted ways with his promotional position, but is that the case now? Are you guys still talking?
Yeah, we go back many years, yeah, to when he was an amateur. He's doing this, you know, he's doing this fight with the Saudis, and that's great. It's good for him. He's such a top guy outside the ring. Lovely wife, lovely family. He had a great father who unfortunately passed away last year. He's just an amazing. He's just a great guy, and I wish him all the best on this fight in Saudi. And you know, we'll see what happens in the future.
Beyond that, do you expect to maybe enter the table again? Have a few talks about?
Yeah, I mean, it's a position where it's quite tricky as a promoter to make offers and stuff like that, because he's got, on the one hand, a perfect position. You know, number one in the world. We got him there. We all know. Yeah, I'm not gonna get a lawsuit from the IBF by saying what I think about the treatment of Filip and us around that whole situation. But that is what it is. That's still something going on in the background. But at the same time, you know, I know this game too well, mate. I've had too many heavyweight world champions. I've had 6, 7 heavyweight world champions. I know exactly what can be made, and also I know the flip side of it, of being stuck there with a lemon of a fight at heavyweight. And you know, I'm not to bore you too much with business things, but there's a big difference in fighting, you know, an unknown heavyweight for a heavyweight world championship, or fighting, I don't know, Fury, Joshua, or Wilder for a heavyweight world championship. In fact, there's probably about a 20 multiplier on that in the difference. You know, you can be boxing for heavyweight world championship and it's not even 7 figures. You can be boxing for heavyweight championship and be 8 figures, you know. So he's in a bit of a tricky one there, because no one knows what happens if the unification takes place in February, which, you know, God willing, it will be, because they're both fit now. So hopefully they will get in and it'll be a fantastic fight. I'm sure it will, and it'll be a spectacle. And congrats for everyone getting that over the line. But at the same time, what happens after that? What happens with those belts? You know, are we going to see fragmented belts? I can't believe Tyson or Usyk, after earning a lot of money, are going to get into the ring against Filip Hrgovic, you know. So I think that belt will go flying. So then it's a question of who's he fighting next. If he's fighting a boxer from Uzbekistan, no disrespect to Uzbekistan, fantastic boxers, fantastic people, but clearly financially is a bloody big difference. So you know, it'll be something that, you know, we'll keep an eye on. I mean, we'll be out in Saudi next week, and supporting Filip as a friend.
Just 2 fights next week I want to bring into your attentions. Obviously, the main event has somebody, or what we think might be the main event, has somebody you used to work with, Mr. Otto-Wallin. How do you fancy his chances against AJ?
You know what? I haven't seen Otto in years. I think he's done really well with Joey Gamache, and actually Joey Gamache, a bit of a story there. Joey Gamache, at the time we had there was the Kessler area, and there was a lot of young Danish, Scandinavian, obviously Swedish fighters, Norwegians, and we took Joey. The training levels weren't fantastic, so we got in Joey to train. I remember the names now, like Eric Skoglund, who was also in the World Boxing Super Series, Anthony Yiggett. And Joey and Otto sort of stayed together when the Scandinavian talent, unfortunately, it's been a bit of a drought of Scandinavian talent, but when they retired or moved off in different directions, Joey and Otto stuck. And I think it shows, A, how good a coach Joey Gamache is, and B, also how dedicated Otto's been at the sport. You know, as a heavyweight, that's not always easy. What I would say, I remember him when in his younger years, he was always it didn't seem like a heavyweight. He was very lively always, and you know, he's he's a nice, very good guy. You know, good luck to him next week. He's got his work cut out for him. But I would say Joey Gamache, you know, there's a trainer who can do it. It's him, you know. And yeah, Otto's, you know, had that great fight against Tyson Fury as well. Okay, it wasn't Tyson's best night. You know, Tyson does throw us a stinker occasionally. That was one of them. But at the same time, also, you know, it's great your opponent throwing you a stinker. You've got to make the most of it, and Otto certainly did that on that night. So yeah, he's rode that, hasn't he? You know, and you know, when I heard that he was going off to the US, I was like, oh crikey, you know, good luck to you, mate. You know, as a Swedish boxer, you've got quite a good domestic market there, but he rolled the dice, and I think he's paid off for him. So good luck to him.
The other big fight on that card, Deontay Wilder, Joseph Parker. Just interested to get your thoughts on that, please, Kalle.
I don't bet.
Yeah.
But I don't know what the odds are. but I definitely put a few quid on Parker. I just, you know, this probably, you know, probably I'm wrong, but I just get that feeling in this card. There's a couple of upsets, right? A couple of upsets. Lindenhoff definitely beaten Bivol, so that's one of them. And the other one, I just got that feeling, you know, Joe can be awkward. He can box. And Wilder's, well, nothing against Wilder boxing abilities, but he's a, you know, he's got that missile, right? And it, you know, if you've got a strategy, you've got to put it through for 12 rounds. That's the tricky part. It's not a 1 round fight, or else I'd definitely put my money on Barker. But it's just, I find it intriguing. I find that fight super intriguing. Yeah, and it's going to be a couple of upsets on the card. By the way, what a fantastic card! You know, night before Christmas, fantastic. Christmas come early for boxing.
Kalle, I do just quickly want to ask on Lyndon's chances. A lot of people have obviously written him off. What would you say to anybody who haven't given him a chance going into that fight with Dimitri Bivol?
Of course they are. Go and look at the Craig Richards fight. Look how Bivol boxes when he's already got another fight in his sights. Yeah, eyes off the prize. The difference is Craig's a very good boxer, but he hasn't got that put away power that Lyndon does. So watch this space. As I said, I don't bet. If I did bet, but sure I get good odds on that one. But no, Lyndon likes this pressure, whereas I think Bivol's, no, he won't feel pressure because he's already looking at the Beterbiev fight. I'm pretty sure that's done already. Not a good situation for a boxer. Not a good situation.
Well, Kalle, if I go and have a little cheeky double on Lyndon and Joseph Parker and he doesn't come in, I'm going to come into you for my refund.
You come to me, I'm expecting a gold Christmas tree off you.
All right, Kalle, listen, I appreciate your time. Obviously, good luck with the show tomorrow night, and I'll see you next week out in Saudi.
See you soon, mate.